Hello, thanks for checking out my video. Today we're going to use these trace, color, and cut worksheets along with another shape worksheet to make a caterpillar. As we're working on our worksheets here, what we would like to focus on are the fine motor skills that we are going to be using with our writing utensil, or some fine motor skills involved with some scissor use, a lot of good bilateral coordination when we do the scissor use, and then some fine motor skills associated with the glue stick if you would like to use the glue stick. In addition to working on those fine motor skills, we are also going to be working on some pattern recognition and sequencing skills as well when we go and make our caterpillar. So let's go ahead and get started. And I think instead of starting with this worksheet and tracing, coloring, and cutting out my shapes, I think what I'd actually like to do is to color my caterpillar and make a sequence. So make a pattern with your caterpillar first, and then you can make the same color circles here. So if I have green, red, green, red, green, then I would have 3 green circles and 2 red circles, because I think I would like to establish what colors I'm going to use first and make the pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the rest of my materials out of the way, except for this piece of paper here. And I think what I'd like to do is, let's see here, I'm going to use just a paper cup because I just have a cup lying around, and I'm going to use this as a border, a tactile cue, so that I can stay within these lines. Because if I color outside of the lines here, I might make the pattern a little bit tough to read. So I'd like to stay within my shape. So to do that, I think I'd like to just put down a paper cup here to act as a border. And then I'm going to go ahead and make my color within the boundary here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. So when I get started here, maybe I can turn my paper a little bit just to make things a little bit easier for me, just with relation to how I'm coloring and the appropriate kind of placement of my hand. So I'm going to turn the paper a little bit, and I'm just going to go ahead and put my cup a little bit closer to the line there so I can establish a nice little border. And this is something that kind of, if you're working with your student, this is something that you would do for your student so that they don't really have to hold the cup there. If they are working on some bilateral coordination skills, then yeah, you would want them to be maybe holding the cup or a little bit more independent with it at least. But this is something really that you're just using as a tactile cue for them so that they can maintain this kind of boundary here. So as we're coloring, we'll just kind of be conscious of that. And then we'll fill this in. And once we have this all the way filled in, we can move on to the next color and complete the pattern. Now that I've colored in my caterpillar and have established a pattern, I can move on to my other sheet of paper here and color in these circles the same color that I just made my caterpillar there. So I'll just be using my green and pink crayons here to make 3 pink circles and 2 green circles. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that and remove it from my plastic bag. Or another thing I can do is, before I trace, color, and cut on the paper, I can actually use this plastic bag much like I would use a sheet protector. But if you don't have a sheet protector, you can use a plastic bag, a freezer bag, and use a dry erase marker. It works pretty well to practice your tracing. So maybe I'll do a little practice before I start my trace, coloring, and cutting on my paper. So I'm going to do that now, just maybe a couple times before I move on. When I'm tracing my circles, if I'm a right hand dominant person, if we start by going to the left, we have occluded much of our path. We can't really see where we're going. So we might actually go a little bit off track, kind of around some of this area right here. Um, if I'm a right-handed dominant person, if I go to the right side, I'm able to see my pathway as I go around the circle the entire time. So if we're working on our visual motor integration skills here with this tracing activity, a lot of what we are, perceiving here is going to dictate what our motor actions are. So it's important to be mindful of, the placement of where your child is relative to this shape here, and then how they go about tracing it. So just a demonstration there, I'm kind of a little bit offline actually when I go to the left. But if I go to the right, I can really see what I'm doing the entire circle, with maybe the exception of this last part here. So it's maybe a little bit more accurate here to go to the right if I'm a right hand dominant person. So I did my practice there on the Ziploc freezer bag, and I can just remove my paper now from my freezer bag if I'm done practicing with that. And I can get back to the activity here with the green and the pink crayons. And maybe what I'd like to do first is to trace the shape. So I can use my green and pink crayons again, or I can just use a marker, or really any other writing utensil. But we have an opportunity now to maybe add a couple extra visual cues along the way. So maybe a good place is a starting point and a couple other points along the way, just to give the eyes a little bit more of a visual target as we go around the circle. As we were discussing in that last segment there, just how your perception plays into your motor skills that are corresponding with the action you're trying to perform here. So maybe just a couple extra visual cues along the way wouldn't be the worst idea there. And we can even make them more frequent or less frequent, or more pronounced, or just kind of these small little dots. So I'll let you decide what is best for your child, and then we will go ahead and trace our shape. So I'm going to go to the right side here, and I'm just going to follow along the dotted line. I'm stabilizing the paper with my non-dominant hand. I'm looking ahead for my next visual cue. In this case, not only is it this dotted line here, but I'm actually looking a little bit further ahead to this red dot right here. So I'm just going to trace these shapes, and then I'm going to color them, and then I'm going to cut them out. So let's finish this up here. We don't have to be perfect. It's good enough for me, and I'm going to go ahead and trace the rest of these. Now I'm ready to color these in. So I think I'm going to go back to my pattern here just to make sure I have the right thing. And I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3 pink and 2 green. If you're working on writing numbers, you can number your sequence here. Actually, I'll just go ahead and do that right now. So I'll do 1, I'll practice writing the number 2, 3, 4, and 5. And your student can write these numbers any size they want, large or small. And then we can go ahead and make the numbers down here on our other sheet once we're done, or before if we want to. I'm going to just do it now. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we want it to look pretty similar to the position of where we made it here, so that we can match these once we've colored them in. So now I'm ready to color them in, and I can reference the number and also then make my decision about the color. So number 1 is pink, so I'm going to go ahead and color in 1 pink. I'm going to color in 2 green. 3 is going to be pink. 4 is going to be green, and then 5 will be pink. So this is just a real easy way to practice writing. You can write letters, so you can practice writing letters or numbers. Really, just using these worksheets to build whatever skill you're hoping to develop with your student. So I'm going to go ahead and finish coloring these in. Now that I'm done matching my number and color to the corresponding one here on the caterpillar, I'm ready to cut out my shapes here on this worksheet. So I can get the caterpillar out of the way and grab my scissors, make sure that we are able to provide enough visual attention to our target here before we really work on scissors independently. So if we're not independent with that, hand over hand assistance is a good idea just for safety. I'm going to go ahead and maybe just kind of do a rough cut and isolate my shapes here so I can have a little bit more precision with my next step when I actually cut out my circles. So you can do this for your student, or they can do it if they kind of have the concept of what we're saying. And get that one out of here. So now I have my 5 circles that are roughly cut, and obviously you can use these as they are, but I really want to work on my precision, my fine motor precision skills here with cutting out these circles. So I'm going to do this again, and maybe I'll start by using number 1. And I'm going to go ahead and cut out these with a lot more precision and using some good bilateral coordination skills to turn the paper and also to turn my dominant hand, my scissor hand here, as I cut along these this shape here. Now I'm ready to cut out the rest of these. Now that I'm done with the cutting portion of this activity, I can go ahead and get my caterpillar here and bring that back into the picture so that we can now reference it as we are building our own down here. So we can now start using some language like first, we'll start with this one, then we go to 2. We can also use some language like on top. So we're going to put 1 on the bottom and 2 on top. This is just a great way to start introducing language associated with this pattern recognition here. So let's be mindful of that as we complete this portion of the activity. And as we are completing this portion of the exercise, we can also be mindful of the placement of our shapes relative to our caterpillar here. So this is our reference. We're going to go ahead and reference this. So our visual attention needs to come back here. So if we were working on some horizontal pursuits, then maybe we would want to turn our our workstation a little bit and place the cutout shapes on the left side and our point of reference on the right side, so that we are having to look back over to the right and then over to the left and over to the right to kind of use our horizontal pursuits in our favor as we recognize the pattern. Each time we're going a little bit further outside of the visual field here, so that's a great way to introduce some horizontal pursuits. Or if we're going to be working on our vertical pursuits, when we need to be kind of placing our reference paper on top with our shapes on the bottom. So you decide what you're going to work on, vertical pursuits or horizontal pursuits. I think for me, I'm going to work on my vertical pursuits. So I'm going to go ahead and make my caterpillar. as I complete my caterpillar, another thing to be aware of is how your student is receiving their materials. Are you giving the materials to them one piece at a time, or are they having to maybe look through a scattered visual field and find the correct sequence? So we're involving some different scanning skills here, some different visual perception skills. You can add a little bit more complexity to this activity by spreading out the visual field, or even if you just jumbled them up and had them kind of sort through it and sift through it. We're adding another fine motor component as well as our visual perception component. So there's a bunch of different ways to manipulate your situation here to your advantage if you're looking to develop a certain skill set here with your students. So be mindful of how you present the materials to them. Now that I've worked on my pattern, I can continue to work on it off of this sheet of paper here without any glue, or if I was so inclined, I can use this sheet of paper here and start matching them this way. It's going to get a little bit tough if I start gluing them onto the paper. I really have to have a concept of maybe some letter recognition or some number recognition, so I can use these now as a reference point. Like, I can't really see this 2 anymore, so I have to know that 2 is after 1, and then I would look for 3 and match it that way. So if we're moving on to our glue stick, be mindful again of how you are presenting the materials to your student. So I'm going to go ahead and glue these onto my paper. So another component of this exercise that came up to add a little bit more complexity to the challenge here is, as I'm placing my pieces onto my paper, I really have to be aware of how I'm orienting this number, because I know that the number that I'm matching here on the bottom that I match to is also on the bottom of the circle. So I need to be mindful of how I'm orienting my paper as I go ahead and match. So we can do a simple match by color, or if we are adding a little bit more complexity to the challenge, then we would make sure that we have a some sort of corresponding number or letter down here that we would have to match and spatially orient. Thanks for checking out my video today. I hope you found it useful. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions on how to implement these strategies with your student.